Welcome, everyone. So excited to kick off this amazing event today for International Women's Day. We have an international group of amazing women here, and we're going to be talking about embracing equity for women with Parkinson's disease. Maybe we'll just give it a minute or two. I see people joining. We'll just make sure that people can join. Great. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Indu Subramanian. I'm a movement disorder specialist, and I run our Parkinson Center of Excellence at the West Los Angeles VA, where we take care of some amazing women living with Parkinson's who are veterans. And I also am a clinical professor of neurology at UCLA at the David Geffen School of Medicine. We're just thrilled today to bring together this international group of women who are really leading the charge for making changes. We'll just pull up our next slide here just to set the tone. So about a year ago, we published this paper and it included a number of the women that are actually on this panel today. Elena Morrow, who is this force of nature. She and I decided to try to bring the voices of some of the women living with Parkinson's disease from around the world into this paper in movement disorders. And we really highlighted, I think, in these pictorials here, some of the main issues. So some things around motor, non-motor, and psychosocial issues that hadn't really been highlighted before. One of the things that I want to bring to focus is that women often don't get care because they're too busy caring for other people. So if that sounds like it resonates with you, please take time for yourself. Self-care, getting care for yourself as a woman is so important if you're living with Parkinson's disease, because there are, as you will see, many barriers along the way, along the road of you getting care. We also highlighted a number of the phases of the hormonal cycle and brought to light some important things that hadn't really been talked about before. So we talked about the effects of menstruation on Parkinson's symptoms. We talked about the effects of pregnancy and the need for a registry. We also talked about the perimenopausal and postmenopausal timeframes. And so I think these pictures, we urge you to check them out and see if they resonate with you. You can actually bring this paper in or have your neurologist or treating team try to take a look at this and help guide your care. Next slide. So in coming up with this paper, we came up with a number of gaps, and we really don't want to just be a group that talks about gaps, but we really want to be filling these gaps as well. So we identified these gaps about a year ago, looking at things like management. So we really talked about improving things like DBS, access. We talked about things like the unique drug metabolism in women. We talked about hormonal factors and menstruation, how that may affect patients and women living with Parkinson's disease. We brought some of the psychosocial aspects, as I showed you in that figure, to light and talked about how we can do better to serve people, women living with Parkinson's disease with these sorts of issues. Next slide. We also talked about the importance of advocating for women and really getting women to identify as important people in the spectrum, needing to be involved in research, needing to be advocating for themselves alongside of men as well. We're not trying to exclude men here, but I think we wanted to bring this webinar here today to just show you how we have started to move the needle and what the gaps continue to be. Next slide. So we talked about things like doing research as well. And I think we have started to move the needle even here, talking about a number of papers that I'll just highlight here. I just took a smattering. There's a number of papers that have come out in the last year. Next slide. So here's one on gender differences in levodopa pharmacokinetics and levodopa naive patients. So starting to look at how drug metabolism is in women. The next slide. Looking at sexual needs and sexual function of patients living with Parkinson's disease. And this paper, including Gila Bronner and some authors from Israel, talks about specific issues in women. Still a lot of work to be done, but there are some surveys now specifically about women and sexual health. Next slide. Here's one on gender gap in DBS for Parkinson's disease. This was a group out of Germany looking at importance of counseling women and improving access for some of these more advanced therapies. Next slide. And then here's a paper on advanced gynecological surgery in women with Parkinson's disease. So we're starting to see more movement, more papers, certainly, I think, in this past year, kind of spearheaded, I think, and a fire has been lit on an international level, caring about this more. And so really, I think today is just going to be a showcase to give you a brief taste of some of the work that's been done, led by women themselves living with Parkinson's disease and some of the folks that care about them and care for them, and some researchers as well. We're going to give you a taste of some of these topics. Probably don't have much time to get into questions today, but we can offer you a chance to reach out via email if you have any questions to the speakers directly. And next slide. So we're going to start with a beautiful collaboration. So we've had a number of support groups across the world that are led by women, for women living with Parkinson's disease. And there's been a beautiful alliance with some of the Spanish-speaking women. Sabela Avion is a PD advocate and co-founder of the Compe de Parkinson's. She'll be speaking to us. But first, we have Dr. Ariadna Tuset Laguna, who's a neuroscientist and researcher in neurodegenerative diseases. And she will be talking about some surveys that they've been doing and some research that they've been doing in Spain and amongst Spanish-speaking people.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction and the invitation to present here some of our research on women that we've been doing in the past year. And so the first study that I would like to present has been recently published with data from the COPARIS cohort, which is a longitudinal prospective study that started here in Spain in 2017, and that involved 35 different hospitals in Spain. So the strength of this study is first the large sample size. You can see here we had 410 men and 271 women that were that had a thorough assessment with extensive clinical and demographic information recorded, and that also had an assessment at baseline and then a follow-up of 5 years. So the results from this study and that was recently published, they support that there are indeed differences in PD in terms of sex, as we already knew, but this is the first big study done in Spain, so it's important for us. And some of the findings we found are common to previous studies, so reinforce the importance of sex. So for example, we found that there are symptoms like depression, fatigue, and pain that are more common in women, while other symptoms like problems with speech and facial expression, or for example, more rigidity and hypersexuality, these are more common in men. We also report that there is that women had a worse perception of their quality of life and they received less social support. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, this study was a follow-up study. So we have this, we report here the results from the 2-year follow-up, and we are currently analyzing the results from the 5-year follow-up. So we see that men have a higher L-DOPA daily dose. There is more impairment on motor symptoms and more pronounced motor complications in female. The burden of non-motor symptoms is higher in men, but the disability of in the activities of daily living, these are more in females. So next slide, please. And the second study that I would like to briefly introduce to you today is the project that we have developed together with women from the Spanish Association Compe de Parkinson, and here represented today by my friend Sabela Avion. So at the time we started this survey, there was only one survey available in Spanish, which was a translation from the survey done by Richelle and PD Avengers. This was an online survey with 14 questions. So we essentially wanted to expand this survey, include additional questions to record other women health experiences, and to get to more women if possible. So we designed an online questionnaire we considered the 4 phases of the women's reproductive and climacteric periods. And essentially, we distributed the survey online through different social media. We had 392 women answering the survey, but we could only use 290 surveys because the rest were essentially not complete or had mistakes. More than half of women were from Spain, and the rest were essentially from South America. And the mean age at diagnosis was 49 years. Next slide, please. Thanks. So as you can see in this table, a total of 126 women answered the survey and that were diagnosed during the reproductive age. So this is it represents 43% of those who answered the survey. So it's a really high number. In order to compare the frequency of the symptoms between women in the different periods of their lives, we considered those women that we divided the women according to the time they answered the survey. So we had 64 women, for example, that answered the survey while they were in the reproductive phase, and 134 that were, for example, in the postmenopause phase. When we compare the frequencies in symptoms, we did not see any significant differences after bonferronic correction, but we did see quite significant and striking trends, for example, towards increased frequency of constipation and urinary urgency, for example, in women that were in more advanced climacteric stages. We also checked other parameters like fluctuations, but here we didn't see differences in the frequency of fluctuation between the different periods of a woman's life. And next slide, please. This is my last slide. And here, essentially, I want to focus on some of the aspects that we investigated with this survey in relation to changes, hormonal changes. So, for example, as previously reported in Richelle's survey, we did find a very significant number of women that reported worsening of symptoms and response to medication during the menstrual cycle. Essentially, most of the women reported worsening of rigidity, tremor, fatigue, and pain. And most of the women, so 68%, reported those changes during the week of menstruation. And for example, 27 of those were before the week of menstruation. 38% of women, for example, indicated less effectiveness of medication during the menstrual cycle. And we also had some questions around pregnancy and others around changes of symptoms during the menopause. And essentially the take-home message is that indeed there are changes in women associated to hormonal, different hormonal phases, and that this survey reinforces this important aspect and reinforces the fact that we need more research into those subjects.
Great.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Ariadna. Just a couple of brief notes. Well, one thing that I want to say, and this I'm going to say in Spanish, so just a second. Se está interpretando esta reunión hoy. No sé si se han dado cuenta, en la parte inferior de la pantalla hay un globito del mundo y pueden seleccionar español. Así que solamente para que lo sepan. I'm going back to English now. Thank you. So it's very important. It was very important for us at Compete Parkinson to voice everything that Ariadna has said. This collaboration has been amazing. The changes in symptoms was what brought us together. We started talking about it, and then we brought it to Ariadna and her team, and they said, yes, let's go for it, let's investigate. So let's do research. So we're very proud, very, very proud of that. So thank you everyone for being here today, and I think that the future is brighter thanks to all the hard work that we're all doing. Thank you so much.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. it's really great to see that the work within Spanish-speaking populations is advancing. And I think we see, some trends that are very, sort of common throughout with non-motor issues, specific psychosocial issues, depression, and things like that, as well as it looks like, we're able to reach more women to participate in research through surveys throughout the world. So I think this is a great way to try to continue to gather data. And I applaud you for the amazing research and advocacy. So up next, we have Dr. Christy LaMonica, who's a PD advocate and a researcher, and she's the chair of the PD Avengers Wellness Group, and she will be presenting to us on more very cool survey research.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to talk today about our PD Avengers Women's Surveys that you can find through Fox Insight, through the Michael J. Fox Foundation. So we have quite a working group. So everyone is listed on this slide. We're just going to skip to the next slide, if that's okay. So we're going to have a series of 3 total surveys. We've gotten 2 released so far through Fox Insight. The last one is TBD. But the first one is experiences of women living with PD, female health and home life. And then number 2 is about pre, peri, and post menopause. And then the last one will be about menstrual history, pregnancy, fertility, HRT, everything kind of combined with the release date TBD. So these surveys are really going to be the most comprehensive surveys to date about women and women's issues. So we've taken all the other good work of everyone else and we've kind of expanded on everything, and we broke these up into 3 surveys so we can really get to the heart of every question that we want to talk about and learn about. So if you haven't taken them, I would encourage you to go to michaeljfox.org, take action to join a study, and then you can sign up for Fox Insight. When you register for Fox Insight, once you sign up and you're listed in the system, you should be sent the survey if it's applicable to you. So we have data back on the first one, so female health and home life. Hopefully we'll get data back on the second one later this month, but if we look at everything so far to date, I'm very envious of your Spanish survey, Sabella and Adriana. We need more YOPD women to take the survey. So if we look at the database for the Fox Insight, you have about 54,000 people to date have taken surveys within Fox Insight. Our survey, there was for the female health and home life, there was 3,038 when I accessed this the other day, and I can break that down into pre, peri, and post. And we are really lacking in the pre group compared to the post group. I feel that we should have more of the pre, at least probably about 200 in comparison. So the amount of women that we have for peri is quite surprising considering it's a transitional state where women aren't in that for very long. You'd expect more to have some more for pre. So if you fit the bill, if you're a woman in general with PD, please take the survey. So if we can go to the next slide. So some take homes from the results from the first survey. So the good news is that overall, most women are receiving preventative care screenings such as regular pap smears, mammograms, bone density scans, and routine blood work. The bad news is that they are not being asked about menstrual cycles and menopause by their movement disorder specialist or neurologist. That's about 79%. 50% of the women do not bring up this topic because they don't feel that they feel like they'll be dismissed, or there isn't time, or that their doctor isn't knowledgeable. So where do you go when you have these types of questions? That from a lot of evidence shows that we have issues with hormones and our cycles, but who do you talk to if you don't feel that you can talk to your neurologist? So that's an issue right there. We also found that self-image is negatively impacted by PD, and that motor symptoms have the greatest impact on negatively affecting self-image. We will actually have a paper that will be in pre-press later today in Journal of Parkinson's. Also from this, socialization is negatively impacted as well. So next slide. For the future, we hopefully will get data for survey 2 soon. And then we can get survey 3 out, and then our commentary is going to be published or in pre-press today. And hopefully we're going to make this a global effort. So we would like to translate the survey, and we're going to actually work on next week, seeing what we can do about getting it to Africa. So that's it for this.
Really awesome, amazing work. So, so just to clarify, YOPD, so young onset Parkinson's disease, the Movement Disorder Society just come up with a different term for that, EOPD, or early onset Parkinson's disease. They've defined it as less than 50. Sounds like any women out there that want to participate in the survey are more than welcome, but we need to be getting more young or early onset women just to really give us the full complement of what everyone out there is really dealing with. I think many younger women probably don't have as much time to participate in research because they're taking care of kids and other responsibilities in the household. But we just really want to encourage people to voice their sort of symptoms and really contribute to research that is happening. And many of these are surveys that you can take on your own time. So we really want to just urge people to try to participate. That's amazing. So next up is Dr. Oosterbaan. So Annelian Oosterbaan, who's MD, PhD. She's a former gynecologist and currently works as an insurance doctor and senior researcher. She's also a woman living with Parkinson's disease, a park influencer. Park influencer. That's a really cool word.
New word.
Yeah. And she's 39 years old now, but diagnosed in age 33, a mother of 4 kids, and a co-author on our paper along with Rochelle, and just an amazing force of nature. I think she has a 1-year-old now, if I'm timing it correctly. And has really just been such an amazing advocate to really move this needle, and has been moving the needle in the space of trying to get this Parkinson's registry off the ground, which is a much needed registry, and we've long awaited. So love to hear from you, Annelian. Please tell us.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to tell you something about our registry. It will be called PrexPark.com. It's the International Pregnancies and Parkinson's Registry, and the expected launch will be in July this year at the WPC as well. Next slide, please. Why did we have we built this registry? Yeah, well, pregnancy and Parkinson's is rare. It's more common, will be more common in the future. That's what we believe, since there are more PD patients, and also because of increasing maternal age. Well, the impact of pregnancy on Parkinson's disease and the other way around is not well understood up to this far, since of the lack of available literature. There are no evidence-based periconceptional advice available, no guidelines or management protocols. Internationally, they are lacking. So this makes deciding on having children after a diagnosis really an insecure and even an anxious process. It was also for me. I already had three kids, and I had to decide whether to have another baby, and there was just no reassuring literature or no proper advice, and this really needs to change. So how are we going to do that? We have built a website, www.prexpark.com, and all pregnant women worldwide can enroll in our registry. It will be based on self-reported data, so the pregnant women themselves will be able to register on our website and get a log on the website, and we will use web-based questionnaires depending on the moment of on the timing in pregnancy. They can already enroll in the beginning of pregnancy, but up to 8 weeks postpartum, since the most important thing will be the birth information, the birth report outcome, and also the course of pregnancy. So up to 8 weeks postpartum, women can enroll. Questionnaires will cover, can we go back? Will cover issues concerning Parkinson's diagnosis, of course, in the beginning, symptoms, medication use, general health, and also pregnancy issues, Parkinson's related topics, and so on. Some questions will be mandatory, some questions will be voluntary. So depending on the time the woman wants to invest, they can fill up the questions. Here you see a little preview on the design of the website, since I really thought it was really looking good. It's not final yet. Don't look at the text, but this is how what the website will look like. And now the link is not open yet, but it will be from the summer on. Well, our goal is to fill the knowledge gap on pregnancy and Parkinson's, and we want to reach as many women in the world as possible. And PD women all over the world will enroll themselves. That's how we believe we can reach as many women as possible. Also by using web-based surveys, we will translate them in multiple languages. We start with English and Dutch, but we'll try to get translations in Spanish and French as soon as possible. Also, yeah, we hope and we would like PD women to unite and spread the word via social media, etc., concerning our registry, and also, of course, spread it through neurologists and neurological organizations, how to say, patient foundations, and etc. The data will serve to provide PD women with the information they highly need to make an informed choice concerning their child wish. And eventually, with the data, we will construct guidelines and management protocols on pregnancy, delivery, advice, and also, of course, concerning breastfeeding in women with Parkinson's disease. Next slide, please. Well, again, the website and the logo and our team. I work here in Nijmegen with Professor Bastian Bloem's team, and these are my colleagues. And there you have my email address in case you have any questions. Thank you.
Really great work there, Anne-Lynn. I mean, really amazing that you've been able to do this in such a short time. I know you've had your hands full, and just with childcare, and I'm just blown away. And I know that there's such amazing energy from Professor Post and Professor Blom to really move this forward. They already have an amazing sort of energy looking at younger people, or early onset patients with Parkinson's disease. And so I think bringing these groups together and really being the sort of forefront of where we can study this from, I think out of the Netherlands is really exciting to me. So happy to help in any way. And I think, commend you for really, really spearheading this just from your own personal need and seeing this gap in your own life. So I think, this is a beautiful example. And I think many beautiful examples here, even with Sabela talking with Ariadna about, sort of as a person living with Parkinson's, being able to communicate with these investigators and researchers and really sort of tell them about what it is that you feel the needs are, and then emphasis being placed in these spaces for really filling these gaps. So I think this is what this Embrace Equity for Women with PD symposium is about, and hopefully we can continue to really try to foster this work and work together on an international level. I love seeing all of this collaboration. It's really amazing. So next up we have some highlights in the advocacy space. So we're going to hear from Sharon Krischer, who is actually one of my own women living with Parkinson's disease in my practice here at UCLA. And she has gone from writing blogs and really transformed through the pandemic from a local support group to really this international representation with Sunday mornings with Twitchy Women. They're doing some very, very cool sort of innovative things around mentoring and helping people to gather more social connection and support. So I'm very excited to hear from Sharon.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. 3 years ago, when the pandemic started, I had been running a group of women for women with Parkinson's. It was kind of a loose support group for several years in the Los Angeles area. And when we realized everything was going to be shut down, we started immediately with a Zoom group on Sunday mornings. With our goal was to meet about every other week until the pandemic ended in a month or 2 months. And here it is 3 years later, we're still going. We're meeting twice a month. But I'm going to backtrack a little bit. When you were diagnosed, where did you reach out to find other people with Parkinson's that you could talk to? Often you would find a friend of a friend or somebody else you would be referred to, and they would talk to you. You would call them, or you would go to a rock steady boxing group or some kind of exercise group or dance group for Parkinson's. And this became your support system. When the pandemic began, everything was taken away from us. And one of the biggest dangers of the pandemic is loneliness. Loneliness is probably the biggest predictor of outcome with Parkinson's. People who are alone, who have no one to talk to, tend to do worse. This has been shown in numerous studies, and I think Indu, you were involved in one of those. So we started on 3 years ago today, actually, on a Sunday morning. We call it Sunday Mornings with Twitchy Women. We started with 9 women. We now have had over 1,000 women from around the world participate. Unlike many of the organizations that do this, this is a totally volunteer run program. We've had numerous speakers on all different kinds of topics. We've had drumming for taiko drumming. We've had urban polling. Next on Sunday we have Peter Tass talking about the vibrating gloves. We've had all different kinds of topics. We've had our own women have panel discussions about DBS and other issues. So it's really been amazing how we've reached out. And shortly after we started seeing people interacting. They needed that connection, and it didn't matter where they came from. They were able to connect with each other on Zoom, which was really wonderful. So what happens, the reality of this whole thing is that when you're given a diagnosis of Parkinson's, you're often told by your doctor, here's a prescription, come back in 3 months. They never tell you to reach out to another person with Parkinson's. And now that we've had all this taken away from us, we had to find ways to reach out to each other. So we reached out through Zoom, and it was amazing. It was amazing. The women made connections, and I've made connections with so many women around the world. And so I don't know how many countries the women participated from. We have many who watch it watch the recordings because they live in Australia, New Zealand, wherever it is. It's in the middle of the night and they can't join us, but it's really worked beautifully. So, but one of the things that came out of this whole thing was that women who were newly diagnosed, especially those during the pandemic, had nowhere to turn. They had nobody to reach out to. I was literally getting phone calls from people. I found you online. I'm on my way home from the doctor. I need help. So we started talking about a peer mentoring program. And there are peer-to-peer mentoring programs in other disease populations, but we didn't really have anything like what we wanted to do for these women. So we had a group of 10 women get together and design a peer-to-peer mentoring program based on some others, one in the breast cancer community and some other things. And because we had no hierarchy, we had no institutions that we were dealing with, we were able to put it together within literally 3 months. And in the 2 years since we've launched the program, we've had over 150 women matched with a mentor. Almost, I would say 95% of them have been very successful. Sometimes it's one phone call, one Zoom call, and that's enough. Other times it's a 6-month relationship. It may turn into a friendship. I know that many of these women that I met with one-on-one before the pandemic have become good friends because we had the opportunity to meet somebody else who understood how we felt. They talked the same language. They knew what we were talking about, and they could give advice. We do have a disclaimer. We are not doctors. We are not healthcare providers. We can talk from our experience only. And it has been amazingly successful. And the mentors benefit from it just as much as the mentees. Many of them have seen that it has changed the way they view living with Parkinson's disease. And our final group is Twitchies Without Partners. We had a number of women who are living alone and had no support in their home, no care partner. and wanted to get together. And they have been meeting for about 6 months now, I think, on Sunday mornings prior to our regular meetings. And they're working now on a toolkit for women who have Parkinson's and no partner in the home. So it's just been an amazing support system for all of these women, and I'm thrilled with the way it's been going. It's really gained its own momentum, and women are coming to us. New women are joining us every single meeting. It's wonderful. So we're hoping that we are providing a place for them that is safe, that is comfortable, and a place where they can talk to other women with Parkinson's and get answers, and they don't feel so lonely. Thank you.
Great. Great. Well, thank you so much. Yes, I definitely have been involved in loneliness research. It is something that has been a passion of mine because it looks like from what we can modify in terms of variables. So we know that wellness is important. We think that, exercise, diet, sleep, and mind-body approaches, these are all things that can make a big difference in terms of quality of life for people living with Parkinson's. But we hadn't really been knowledgeable about the effects of loneliness and social connection. And so I think many of these support groups really do fill that void. And I think that, if you're listening out there and you are alone living with Parkinson's, you haven't really brought anyone else into your world, it's so important to be able to talk to others. And for women living with Parkinson's, it's pretty clear that in terms of support, it may not be that your spouse, it might not be your husband, or your son that's really going to be supporting you. It may be another woman in your life. And so what we've been trying to do is help women find people that can support them early on from diagnosis and try to identify somebody that they can kind of build a tribe with, or even just a close friend. Maybe it's your best friend from high school, your sister, your neighbor, another woman living with Parkinson's that you might meet through one of these mechanisms. But really, find that person. It's just so important to have a place, a safe space to speak and talk and confide in someone around some of these issues, because it can really be a really great way to buffer some of the stressors, and is actually good for, as people have talked about, not just the person, but often the volunteer or the mentor as well. There's a huge amount of benefit we find in giving people good purpose and meaning in life, and volunteerism and helping others through this process can really fill that. So so exciting. All right, we'll go on to the next speaker here. So we have Gaynor Edwards, who's a PD advocate, founder Spotlight, founder of the Spotlight in YOPD for those with young onset Parkinson's disease. Gaynor?
Hello, Indu. Thank you for the intro. And thanks for the invite, and including Spotlight YOPD, which I am the founder and also the CEO. It's the first, well, it was the first registered charity specifically representing the needs of people with young onset Parkinson's. But I'm here to talk to you about the book that we're producing in my capacity as a co-chair of the WPC working group for YOPD. And just to quickly say, the YOPD, EOPD is not done and dusted yet. That's still being discussed. And as far as I think the collaboration, which is so necessary and which is definitely becoming more prevalent within the community, which is fantastic, I think YOPD strikes a far more prominent chord with the patient community. But that's another webinar probably. Anyway, so In Her Shoes, we decided to create a book. Do you remember books? So this is In Her Shoes, which is, as it says, written by women who have walked that path. And it's people who, so huge kudos, first of all, to Eli, and also to Helen, because it's Helen who suggested that not only we, within the working group, should we be looking at obviously the underrepresented group of YOPD, but specifically YOPD women. And therefore, she kind of gave me this to do as well, or to launch an additional group. And this is a result of it. So when I was first diagnosed, one of the things that I kept going back to my neurologist about was, how do I find a gynecologist that has an understanding of YOPD? And apparently this is how you do it. You bring a book out and finally you get to meet Annie-Anne. So this is first-hand experience of people with young onset, women with young onset Parkinson's. And of course, you know, during certain times of the month, if you get a group of women in the room, they tend to sync and they realize that they have an awful lot in common. And that's what happened with this book. So we're looking at periods, pregnancy, parenthood, prevention, and the power of a positive perspective when diagnosed with this old man's disease. And of course, one of the ironies of this is that even though it's called In Her Shoes, most women with Parkinson's will have had to have given up their best heels and will end up probably wearing the trainers that are pictured on the adjacent page. Now, it's by no means, this isn't a definitive work. This is very much a starting point. And although it's going to be a printed book, a printed takeaway for people at the WPC, it also has that, you know, we imagine it will be updated and it can be added to, and it will be also available as an electronic version. Yeah, well, I don't know how far I'm through. Sorry, Eros, I haven't been looking at that.
That's great. No, I think you've highlighted some pretty important things there. I love the shoes. They actually might match my shirt here, so, or my sweater. So very awesome. I love all of these unique ideas. And I think, you know, it's just amazing that women are encouraging other women living with us to do cool things. And I think, again, you know, get enough smart, motivated women together and we can change the world. So I think, you know, alongside the men, of course, that we're also living around and being supported by, but I think I just love this energy. It's amazing. So, so that was great. I guess last but not least, we'll be hearing from Rochelle, and then we may have a few minutes to sort of touch on some of the questions briefly. But Rochelle Flanagan is an amazing PD advocate. She's a dietitian working in the space of helping women and people living with Parkinson's, and just a dietitian in general in Ireland. She's also a mother, amazing WPC ambassador, and we'll be working together at the WPC to try to bring out some more of these discussions and some roundtables and things like that. So she'll be speaking to us today about My Moves Matter. This digital self-care companion for women with Parkinson's is an amazing, amazing force of nature, and really just has moved this needle tremendously. Very, very tireless, and really just excited to see what we are going to see here today.
Thanks a million, Minju. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it's interesting in terms of, as you say, all the women, and we got to remember that Parkinson's is a lack of dopamine. So getting involved in all of these things are good for our dopamine. So basically, you know, developing this self-care app for women really arose out of the work that we did in the surveys and in the paper. So I'm just going to give a backdrop to it. So in the original PD Avengers survey, this really was something that I put together on the basis of my experience, and also a number of women that I had connected with through, you know, social media support groups and through the WPC that I met through the Kyoto WPC. And one of the survey's questions was, you know, did your symptoms get worse around your menstrual cycle? Because I noticed this happened and many others did too. And you'll see here that, you know, 85% of women said that basically the week before their periods, that yes, their symptoms got worse. And during the week of bleed, that 48%. Now, this is actually the English response survey. What's interesting is we did a separate survey that Sabella and Compay team translated, and you'll see it actually ties in a bit more with Ariadne's survey, which showed that actually, you know, there was a, you know, almost as high a split during the week of bleed. So I don't know if that is a difference in terms of, you know, ethnicity or, you know, latitude, you know, that there's a difference in terms of when the symptoms, but it's a very strong message that our Parkinson's symptoms get worse around your menstrual bleed, and it's really to do with your estrogen levels dropping and having an effect on your dopamine levels. So the other thing is it's not just about the menstrual, the younger onset. It's also for people who are going perimenopause into menopause. And we asked women, did they notice that their symptom control was more difficult during the perimenopause, so as they're transitioning into menopause? And you'll see here that over 60% said yes. Now the cohort were quite small on this, but hopefully we'll see more in the Michael J. Fox larger surveys. What was really astounding, though, was when we asked women, did neurologists interact with you around issues like the impact of hormones on your symptoms? Or did they adjust medication around your cycles? Did they suggest HRT or talk to you about the effect of perimenopause or menopause? And basically there was a resounding no. I mean, on average, it was about 90% of the women said that the neurologist did not talk to them. So this is really, what sort of really drove me and, many others along on this journey, was to actually raise our voices. So we set up a thing called the Women's Parkinson's Project to sort of raise awareness around that. And then I specifically said, I'm going to do something about this in terms of having a way to validate women and what they're experiencing, because they were basically not being listened to. So what I did was I took part in a digital hackathon out of Switzerland, and we won the hackathon with the idea of basically tracking women's Parkinson's symptoms across their menstrual cycle and their medication intake. But this, just to say, is this has been an app that has been developed by women with Parkinson's for women with Parkinson's. We've had focus groups of patients and neurologists. We've done one-to-one interviews with women across different ages and life stages and PD stages. We've interviewed 12 expert neurologists. We've had a workshop with women with Parkinson's. We've done a quantitative survey. And currently at the moment, the app will be launched at the beginning of April, and we have 11 women developing it with us and feeding back as they go along. And ultimately what it's going to do is help women track their symptoms using what I call a neuroaccessible interface, because when our symptoms go off, it's very hard to interact with tiny buttons and sliders. So, it's going to be using voice and video to enable people to log their symptoms, because we only get to see a neurologist for 1 hour maximum, probably a year. And, as Sarah Rogari, one of our, colleagues with Parkinson's, pointed out, that's, 8,600 hours that we're left alone to manage things. So ultimately, the other thing that's really important is, like, 98% of people with Parkinson's take medications at least 3 times a day, if not more. So medication adherence is actually really important. So it'll enable you to remember your medication, understand your symptoms, and also track them against things like your period, and identify patterns so that you can see, and you'll be able to see yourself, yeah, actually, I'm not imagining this. My symptoms are worse, the week before my menstrual cycle or during my menstrual bleed. And you'll be able to share this with your neurologist and your care team so they can actually see, oh, okay, we need to actually start doing something about this. So ultimately, the app, as I say, is been launched at the beginning of April. So if people would like to, they can sign up on the mindsmatter.com website. And also we have developed ebooks in the interim to help women that they can bring to their neurologists and their care teams, so they can go onto the website and sign up, and they can download it in English. And I've also, thanks to Conpay and the translators there, we've done a Spanish version as well. So it explains all about the impact of the menstrual cycle on Parkinson's symptoms and what you can do. There's also a tracker, a sort of a spreadsheet that you can use in the interim until the app is launched. And you can bring that to your neurologist and ask for help with your treatment. Because we do know, going back to Anne-Lien's point, or I can't remember who was in terms of the slides, but we know that some women who are put on extra levodopa, say the week before their menstrual bleed, that improves their symptoms. We know other women who are put on oral contraceptive pill on a permanent basis, don't have a break for the week, their symptoms improve. But the evidence is very ad hoc, and we need prospective data. So we're also hoping to do a pilot trial through the app to actually prove, and unfortunately that's what we need to do to get the clinical guidelines to enable people to help women in this situation. So just going to go on to just to highlight with regard to the World Parkinson's Congress, of which I'm an ambassador. And the reason I decided to become ambassador, because I was blown away by the amazing support, in terms of meeting other people with Parkinson's, especially as a young woman with young onset. I had a fear around it, and I had actually hidden it for 2 years. And when I went to the World Parkinson's Congress, it just blew that out of the water. So many amazing advocates, but also neurologists, experts in Parkinson's that you can learn from. So I just want to point out that the early bird registration is closing on the 24th of March. And also those of you who are interested in research, there are late breaking abstracts deadline of April the 2nd. And those of you who are looking for people to help your newly diagnosed, there's a buddies program where you can actually be paired up with someone to help you navigate the WPC and beyond. So I just wanted to put a shout out to that to encourage you. And it's in Barcelona. So especially if you're in the Europe side of things, the next one will probably be further away in another, I think it's 3 years time. So great to get on board. So that brings me to the end now. I think we've just 10 minutes left. So I have to applaud everyone for your timekeeping.
Awesome. Well, you've really done some amazing things there, Rochelle. And I think you've been a force of nature. I know I've been sort of there along the way, and you kept, listening very carefully to feedback, constantly surveying, I think other women, researchers, as well as neurologists. And I think that's the way we have to do this, is really collaborate, and just work together, because there's huge needs. And I think that we are starting to fill some of these gaps. I think if you can look at that list that we put up at the beginning around management, around advocacy, around research, around many of these sort of things are starting to trickle in, but there's obviously huge gaps. And I think many of the sort of take-home points I think that have been stressed here are the importance of women connecting with other women trying to do this work, and the men that also are sort of supporting. But I think even from a psychosocial aspect, there are unique issues that happen for women that have been highlighted, including changes in image, self-image, stigma. Rochelle just mentioned about how she felt like she had to hide it for the first 2 years, and really then felt much more open when she was able to meet other people living with this, other women and other young women that looked like her, and could then, turn this energy from hiding into this sort of advocacy and really how to do better and help others, which I think is really part of this sort of embrace equity for women with PD kind of framework and hopefully energy. We have a few questions in the chat. Fernando Cubillos has been very active here in the chat. So we may not be able to get to all of these, but I think there's been a few things that have been highlighted. So I just will point out a couple of these. We probably won't be able to answer all of these, but one is that there's been some tracking of hospitalized patients and looking at specifically gynecological conditions for women that are hospitalized. I pointed out that paper by Abhimanyu Mahajan, and that talks a little bit about some of these specific issues. There's also a comment here by Sarah Winter, who talks about the lack of representation for prodromal, so people that are preclinical. Hopefully some of the surveys may be able to sort of track women that may be at risk for developing, confirmed motor Parkinson's disease, but may have other prodromal symptoms. So I think this is an important gap. There's also been an interest to understand, whether some of these surveys are available to women who speak Spanish. And I think when Sevilla is involved, there is nothing that doesn't get translated. Literally everything that I put out there, Sevilla is like on it to try to get that translated. And I think this is a beautiful sort of collaboration. So I think there's been a question about the Fox Foundation surveys, the surveys for questionnaires for quality of life. These are all been answered here in the chat. There's an answer about questionnaires for mentees. How do mentees get paired with mentors? And there's an application, and people are surveyed around their interests and tried to match that way. There's also been a question about whether the Aware in Care Kit program from the PF has been known about with amongst women, and I think that we can point women to that as well. I think there are all kinds of gaps in care for all people living with Parkinson's when they get hospitalized. So urge people to take a look at that, but specifically for women-specific issues like pregnancy, gynecological surgeries, and other specific things. I think we need to do more work to represent some of these specific things in this Aware in Care. There's also been a question Rochelle answered about whether this app will be available in Spanish, and it looks like it will be in many other languages soon. So great questions, and we'll continue the dialogue. I just wanted to let Rochelle maybe have a minute or two to speak about, sort of her takeaway and her hopes for the future, and then I will close it out.
For me, Indu, was it? Sorry, I missed that.
I was just saying that I'd like to give you a minute or two. We have 5 minutes left, so
okay,
I want a minute or two just to close it out from your end, since I think panel together and did such a beautiful job. I wanted to see if there was something specific that you wanted to highlight from this showcase, and also your hopes for the future.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just blown away by, when the community can come together. I think it's a real showcase of, working with, yourself as a movement disorder specialist, with Helen Matthews, from a research perspective, from MJ Fox, from, Radboud to, support groups like Trichu, and Conpay. Like, it's amazing what can happen when the barriers are broken down and we actually just focus on the end game. So I think, if we've managed to do what we've done, in a year, I'm really excited to see what's going to happen in a year's time. And I think, I just want to thank Helen Matthews, who has sort of really facilitated a group of us women together, that we meet every 6 weeks to see, what things can we do. And I would like to encourage anyone out there who wants to support this initiative and, to research in this area to drive it forward. I suppose the other thing I want to mention is it's not about men versus women, women versus men. This is about personalized medicine. So ultimately, it's about getting the best outcome for everybody, regardless of your gender, your age, ethnicity. So I think but we have to start somewhere, and we're starting with what we know, which is as women. And I just want to also thank you, Indu, because you've really helped by that first paper being published. I think was a kind of a watershed for us all to work behind. And I think we can use that list literally as our kind of strategic document, which we work and see how things been achieved. So thank you for that. And thanks for everyone for turning up, because this was turned around in a week. So it's pretty impressive. Well done, everyone.
Absolutely. So just to highlight one or two other things, since we have a minute here. So Claudia Martinez points out that there's a peer mentee program that the Davis Finney Foundation has with women ambassadors. And now we also have a Hispanic ambassadors, 7 amazing women, including Savea, who can connect with Spanish speaking women at the moment. So that's really, pretty profound. I mean, I think we're just really connecting dots across the world. And, I think we can see with the power, unfortunately, we had this pandemic that froze us in our tracks, and, we had to be sort of sheltering in place, but we've, I think, become very innovative in being able to reach each other. And it's really, I think, the ability to be on this Zoom type platform or connect through FaceTime or other phone calls with each other across the world has really allowed people to find people that look like them, that they see in themselves, and that they can really connect with. So we urge you again, if you're out there living with Parkinson's and you haven't become part of this community of advocates or sort of cheerleaders in the space, there are so many ways to get involved. Come out to the WPC, reach out to some of the folks here. You see this whole international representation. And I think, helping women and understanding the sort of hormonal influences is just going to help move the needle for the disease in general, and to help, understand the basic sort of pathophysiology and biology of what's really going on. So really just applaud all of you. So excited. This energy will continue. Hopefully we'll be able to bring even more exciting things as we go through the WPC and into next year. And I'm just so excited to see where, all of these surveys end up. Happy to help from my end and continue to be a cheerleader of all of you. And, the apps, just so many exciting programs. So stay tuned, everyone. And happy Women, what is it? It's like Women's Week, Amazing Women's Day. It's like, I don't even know.
It's International Women's Day, technically on the 8th, but they kind of do events all through the week. But and just to say a shout out to all the other women out there, there's so many that have been doing great work, like the Parkinson's Diva, to Shilpa Raul. Like, there are so many people, Matilda Thomas. There are many people, and there's lots of people doing things. So this is just a representation of, some of the work that's been done. So I just want to put a shout out to everybody who's really pushing the needle for us all.
Well, hats off to you all, and best of luck and continued Godspeed with all of this work, because it's so important. So have a great weekend, everyone, and we look forward to more updates.
Thanks, Emil.
Bye, everyone.